Hi everyone, my name is Aidaly Xicotencatl, and I'm really looking forward to share my capstone with you all. It's titled From San Diego to San Bernardino, a heat monitoring and green schoolyard model for heat resilient schools. This project looks at heat in public and school environments, so how we measure it, who bears the greatest burden, and how a model developed in Southeast San Diego can inform heat resilient schoolyard design in hotter, more vulnerable inland districts like San Bernardino County, located here in California. So extreme heat is becoming a much bigger issue for schools in California, and it matters far more than just comfort. It affects students' health, attention, learning conditions, and really the day-to-day functioning of school spaces. This is important because children experience heat very directly through the places they move through every day, such as their classrooms, their lunch areas, their playgrounds, and other outdoor spaces. And that's why this issue matters. More than 2.5 million students in California attend schools with less than 5% tree canopy, and San Bernardino County is one of those regions where they're also projected to have about 131 days each year above 90 degrees by 2050. And historically, red line neighborhoods where many of the schools most affected by heat are located have on average about 37% less tree canopy than non-red line areas. So these statistics point to what heat actually looks like in school settings. It can look like, for example, children spending time on asphalt play areas that can reach between 150 to 165 degrees on hot days, and schools in underinvested neighborhoods trying to manage heat with limited shade, canopy, and uneven cooling infrastructure. And this picture that I took shows exactly that. This is from one of my school sites in San Diego, Cholla Elementary, showing the turf these kids in the picture were playing on was 139.5 degrees Fahrenheit, taken on a day that was relatively cool. That is why extreme heat in schools is not only a climate issue, but an environmental justice and equity issue, because the campuses facing the greatest exposure are often the ones with the fewest resources to respond. And that leads to my central research question: how can evidence from heat monitoring, climate education, and design interventions at San Diego school sites be used to build a transferable model of heat-resilient schoolyards that is compelling and feasible for districts like San Bernardino? This question runs through three threads throughout this project. The first is to measure, so documenting microclimate heat variability across indoor and outdoor spaces. The second one is to understand, so analyzing the equity dimensions of who is most exposed and why. And then the third is to transfer, so developing methods and findings that can be adapted in higher heat inland communities where the need is even more urgent. And my capstone focuses on two public schools in Southeast San Diego, Cholla Elementary and Millennial Tech Middle School, both within San Diego Unified School District. Cholla serves about 530 students in grades K through 5, and as you can see in the charts, over 81% of students are Hispanic or Latino, and 503 out of those 530 enrolled students are classified as socioeconomically disadvantaged. As for Millennial Tech Middle, they have about 378 enrolled students in grades 6 through 8 with a similarly diverse student body, and 338 of those students come from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds as well, coming from data taken this past year. And both schools sit in historically underinvested community with limited tree canopy and hotter neighborhood microclimates where these schools are representative of hundreds of schools across California where the conditions for heat risk already exist. And this project uses an environmental justice lens built on 4 connected ideas to show how heat risk in schools is a triple jeopardy of higher exposure, greater susceptibility, and a lower capacity to adapt for historically disinvested communities. First is unequal heat exposure. So about 94% of historically redline urban neighborhoods show higher heat levels than non-redline zones. Redlining didn't just shape housing, it shaped who has trees, who has shade, and who lives in the hottest part of a city. The second is schoolyard disparity. So schools serving low-income students and students of color are far more likely to have minimal canopy and more asphalt, reflecting the same patterns of disinvestment, but at the campus level. Third is health vulnerability. So these same communities have higher rates of asthma, diabetes, and other pre-existing conditions that amplify heat risk and other cascading issues. And then fourthly, a policy gap. So as of 2026, neither San Diego Unified nor San Bernardino County Unified has an active heat protocol section in their school safety plans, even though the state has issued heat guidance for schools, and agencies such as Cal OSHA has heat illness prevention standards. So the policy tools do exist, but local adoption is currently behind. And now moving on to the methods for my project, I deployed hobo temperature sensors at both campuses for over a full school week in late April and early May. At Choice Mead, I placed one sensor in a relatively cooler classroom and one in a relatively warmer classroom based on staff input, and a third sensor was placed in a common outdoor student play area between a soccer field and an open exposed playground. The goal was to capture the range of heat that students actually experience moving between indoor and outdoor student spaces during a typical school day. And at Millennial Tech, I followed a similar approach, so one sensor in a cooler classroom, one in a warmer classroom, and placed the outdoor heat monitor near the student drop-off zone and outdoor lunch table area. This allowed me to compare not only indoor versus outdoor conditions, but to also see how different kinds of outdoor student spaces vary over the course of a week. And here is the actual monitoring data collected from both schools. Choice Mead is on top, Millennial Tech is at the bottom, and each campus shows 3 lines. Blue is the outdoor temperature, orange is the warmer indoor classroom temperature, and yellow is the cooler indoor classroom temperature. You can see the blue outdoor line spiking and dropping sharply each day, while the orange and yellow indoor lines are almost flat by comparison, staying in a much narrower band. That contrast showing the outdoor variability with the buffered indoor stability is the central story of this finding. And now going on to focusing on that blue outdoor line, I want to point out 3 things. So at Choice Mead, the outdoor sensor peaked at 86 degrees Fahrenheit on April 30th. At Millennial Tech, the outdoor lunch and drop-off area hit 84 degrees on May 1st and May 2nd. And lastly, across the monitoring week, the daily outdoor swing from early morning lows to afternoon peaks was roughly 20 degrees Fahrenheit every single school day. And what makes that significant is timing. Those afternoon peaks happen between noon and 3 p.m., which is exactly when students are outside for lunch, recess, and transitions between classes. So the hottest part of the day and the most outdoor student exposure overlap almost perfectly. And I also want to note that this was a relatively cool, partly cloudy week in early May that I took these samples, and that these peak temperatures would be considerably higher during a summer heat wave or a hot September week at the beginning of the school year. Moving on to the indoor findings, looking now at the indoor orange and yellow lines, 3 patterns also stand out. First, you can clearly see the buffer. During afternoon peaks, indoor classrooms are about 5 to 10 degrees cooler than the outdoor zones. And on moderately warm days like these, the building itself is providing a protective barrier through aspects such as insulation, room orientation, and window shading that are all contributing to this. Second, looking at the warmer classroom orange line at Choice Mead, you can see that it tracks the outdoor curve more closely than the cooler classroom does. That's the sun-exposed roof effect. Rooms on the south or west side of older buildings absorb and transmit outdoor heat indoors. The cooler classroom has more protection from its position and orientation. This tells us that building design choices are already shaping who is more or less exposed even inside the same school. And third, and this is the detail that I find most interesting, looking at Choice Mead on May 5th and May 6th, the outdoor blue line dips at midday compared to the other days displaying cloud cover, so temporary natural shade measurably reduced the outdoor peak temperatures. That is exactly what tree canopy and shade structures can do, but in a more permanent way. Here, that data is just making that supporting design argument for me. So what does this monitoring tell us about schoolyard design, and how does it connect to work already happening at these campuses? Well, at Millennial Tech, Earth Lab is a 4-acre climate action park serving as an outdoor classroom where students engage in STEAM learning and climate education to help students and community members develop strong environmental and community stewardship. At Choice Mead, Nature Play is a green pilot project transforming an asphalt playground into a nature-based area. This project focuses on transforming a canyon-adjacent school playground into a play area and trail that provides shading structure and habitat restoration. Both projects at these 2 campuses are actively beginning to replace asphalt with trees, shade structures, and nature-based surfaces, using community-driven design to implement climate-ready infrastructure to reduce impacts, which I think is really incredible. This leads to what I see as the transferable model emerging from San Diego. What distinguishes the San Diego case is that it integrates 3 things: heat monitoring, generating campus-specific evidence of heat exposure, and using that evidence to guide shade, trees, and surface changes. And lastly, climate education, all grounded in community partnership, engaging students, families, and community organizations throughout. These partnerships between UCSD's Center on Global Justice, Groundwork San Diego, which is a local nonprofit, students, families, and school staff is what really makes this work. Students aren't just recipients of a cooler schoolyard, they're learning about heat, watershed ecology, and environmental justice through the schoolyard itself. The Earth Lab, for example, becomes both the infrastructure and then the curriculum. And showing the pictures here on the screen, on the left shows pictures from MTM during their STEAM night where students and their families come together for kids to show the current projects that they're working on. One of these projects, as you can see in the picture here, shows a model of MTM and the neighborhood surrounding the school. It shows the type of neighborhood that kids want in their own region. They added more green space, solar panels on more buildings, more bike lanes, and just set goals that they want to envision their local community to look like. And on the right hand shows Choya's Mead's heat mapping activity, where we went and talked about heat within their own campus and had kids use surface temperature guns and FLIR thermal cameras connected to iPads so that students can see how heat affects them and have them write their own observations, showing the difference that shade and open exposure have. This integrated model where we measure, design, and educate together is what makes it transferable. It isn't just a technical solution, it's more of a community-owned one. And that brings me to San Bernardino County, which I'm treating as a parallel higher stakes inland application site. As I mentioned earlier, by 2050, San Bernardino is projected to have 131 days above 90 degrees, but also have 35 days above 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Additionally, more than 300 warehouses sit within 1,000 feet of schools, creating what is known as a diesel death zone that compounds heat with air quality harm. And between 2018 and 2022, the county lost more than 25% of limited schoolyard green space it already had due to industrialization. The populations at risk look very similar to Southeast San Diego: low-income communities of color, under-resourced schools, and rapid population growth in areas such as Apple Valley, Victorville, and Hesperia, where families have relocated for affordability. What transfers from San Diego are the methods, so the sensor methodology, the heat mapping approach, the community engaged design process, and the ability to link this to state funding. However, what has to be built first is trust and sustaining partnerships with local districts, community organizations, and local communities, which are key. And I want to close with 4 brief policy takeaways from this project, not just what schools need in general, but what this project suggests about implementation. First is to add heat protocols to school safety plans. Neither district has one, as I mentioned earlier. California CDPH heat guidance and Cal OSHA's heat illness prevention standards already exist, so this is a matter of local adoption rather than just implementing new policy. Second is using campus heat sensor data to drive investment decisions. So the value of microclimate monitoring isn't just knowing that it's hot, it's having evidence to say that this outdoor zone at this school exceeds certain safety thresholds for children during a certain time of school day or school year. And that's the kind of data that can prioritize structures, solar canopies, tree planting, and HVAC upgrades throughout most exposed sites. Third is leveraging fundings from programs such as California's Climate Ready Schools Framework and CAL FIRE Green Schoolyard Grants. Campus-level heat data makes a compelling case for why high-risk schools should receive these investments in the first place. And then lastly, it's building community partnership before anything. The San Diego model works well because it's trust-based and community-driven, and any expansion to San Bernardino must be built that same way. And I want to end by thanking my capstone committee. Thank you, Dr. Mark Merrifield, my chair. Thank you, Dr. Kyle Haynes from the UCSD Center on Global Justice. Thank you, Dr. Muriel Robnowitz-Bussel from UCSD's Urban Studies and Planning Department. And then thank you, Dr. Tariq Ben-Marnia, also from SIO. I also would like to thank the Julia Brown Fund for helping me sponsor my heat monitors so that I could be able to do this project. And then I want to thank Corey and Jada, and then lastly, thank my amazing, incredible cohort. It was a privilege working with you throughout this year.
Good morning. I wanted to thank you for that incredible presentation. With underserviced communities and these schools, a lot of times, a lot of the administrators and teachers are overtasked and don't have time to submit the grant proposals and go after this funding. So what policy recommendations or community engagement would you recommend to help bridge that gap for these overtapped schools to get the funding to implement these programs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think just like modeling my experience working with San Diego school sites, I worked with the Center on Global Justice with Kyle. He has a bunch of fellows that work with teachers and other people working together just to help fund things and like move things along and even be involved with school activities. So I think just the foundation is just making sure that you have as much people involved in order to be able to prove that this is worth caring about and to like basically pitch it to like investors and like policymakers, because I think community is what drives action.